an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Veronica Mars, Season 3, Episode 17, Debasement Tapes. In this episode, Paul Rudd is here, and he's playing the lone remainder of a duo who was super famous, and now he's trying to make it on his own, but he's feeling sad about life, and frankly, tale as old as time. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Excuse me. God, guys. Thank you very much to Agnes for commissioning this episode. I'm sorry. I'm so, froggy today in my throat. Keeps happening. I think it's my allergies starting because it's springtime. I love spring, but that's the worst. So, this episode, it's the one with Paul Rudd, right? That's how everybody has to think about this one. What an odd thing. I want to know, because, now Paul Rudd is such a thing. Was he when this came out? Because I feel like he had been a thing for a bit before this episode aired. So I have to think it was maybe a bit of a big deal that they got him, but I don't know. Maybe it wasn't. He's very good in this role, though. But we will get to that. I just really was, for a moment, not entirely sure that it was him, because it's rare for him to play this type, somebody who's kind of a slob. And so I didn't entirely recognize him right away, I will be honest. But we're going to back up here and start at the beginning of the episode. Veronica is quizzing Wallace about Piz. So, what we're doing this episode, as it turns out, is we're going to have Veronica not actually, choosing Piz. She does, by the end of it, it feels. But at the start, what we get is very clearly a Veronica that regrets her choices. She is feeling like probably kissing was a bad plan. She's worried that he is already getting too attached. She doesn't want to actually talk to him about it or face it herself. So she is quizzing Wallace on the vibe that Wallace has been getting from Piz. And Wallace is understandably kind of not interested in having this conversation. I think Wallace's feeling about the whole thing is, you knew he liked you. You made out with him. What the fuck did you think was going to happen afterward? And if you have a problem with how things have worked out, maybe you should take that up with the guy you're having the issue with, instead of finding out from his best friend in a very vague and roundabout way, which can't possibly be particularly accurate. And I just got to say Team Wallace on this one. I just really want her to just get a grip. That's kind of where I'm at with Veronica right now. Just girl, get a hold of yourself. What are you doing? Eventually, she does. But I won't lie, really frustrated at the way this started off. And especially because eventually she does the whole, I think we jumped into something a little bit too much and we should just be friends. And I was like, are you kidding me? Really, bitch? Again, you knew that he liked you. And I understand maybe making mistakes sometimes, and maybe she felt like she jumped into it a little bit because of the way that she felt about everything that Logan had done for Parker for her birthday. So perhaps she was I was feeling a little insecure, I was feeling a little bit jealous, and I decided to just throw myself into a thing. And it wasn't a good idea, but it's just a shame whenever that sort of thing happens with a person that actually likes you and has been carrying a torch for a minute, So anyway, that winds up like straightening itself out, but I really was concerned to start off with, and I'm very, very relieved that by the end of this, it seems like she has opened the door to them just really trying to be a couple after all. And I'm here for that, you know? So then we go to Piz, and he is answering a bunch of pop culture questions about this, not even pop culture, a bunch of questions about a particular band called My Pretty Pony. First of all, why is that the name that they decided to go with for this band? That feels like an odd choice. I'm not mad about it, but it is odd. Especially considering that, like, My Little Pony has been sort of co-opted into that bronies thing. So there's like a weird unintentional association there that I find really like off-putting. But, you know, maybe that's just me. But regardless, yes, the quiz, it's very refreshing, I will be honest, to see two dudes being quizzed by a woman about a band instead of the reverse, because that is the gatekeeping shit that tends to happen. And the whole thing is that Piz is supposed to be the one guiding Desmond Fellows around campus and getting him set up for his show. So he's very excited about getting this assignment. But as we see a little bit later, it doesn't turn out the way he had thought. Things go better by the end, but the assignment isn't like the plum gig he was expecting or hoping for. And this is just something that I think in the year of our Lizzo 2021, we do have a better understanding of what pieces of shit so many of our idols actually turn out to be. Like, we're more prepared for that than we used to be. I think this sort of thing came as a lot more of a shock once upon a time. And now people are out here on their Twitters just making a goddamn fool of themselves right out of the gate. And we know for sure by the time we meet them that they suck. It's a sort of blessing and a curse. You like to be in the position where you've got your knowledge, it's power. On the other hand, you partially wish you didn't know how much they sucked. You know what I mean? And when he goes and gets him, you know what? I'm jumping ahead a little bit here. Actually, no, I'm not. That is the next scene. Okay, I thought that I was jumping ahead. He is with him checking into the Neptune Grand, and he's talking about how he was the biggest My Pretty Pony fan. This dude is just not really, first of all, interested in hearing about how much people loved his band. Eventually somebody requests a particular song when he's like on the radio doing his interview, and he says something like, "Oh yeah, one of our greatest hit," right? And just sort of implies the fact that, oh, of course you want to listen to the one song that got played endlessly forever. He asked for a drink, tonic water on ice. And when they get to the room, we see him with like a bunch of open mini bottles of booze that he's pouring over the ice. I mean, that's enough for like 3 people. And they're talking about how this place has all the amenities. It's the dude whose name I'm forgetting, who is the bellhop. And he's still there. And Desmond is like, what is this dude still here for? And he says, waiting for a tip, like they do in America. Which, on the one hand, he's not wrong, but on the other hand, that's a really ballsy thing to say. And I wouldn't, personally. On the other hand, I don't know how much of a dick this dude has been, you know, just for the past like 5 minutes that he's known him. So maybe he's like, you know, I'm just gonna fucking demand that I get some money out of this because you suck and you're high maintenance and I hate you. Which I don't know that I'd be mad at him. I just wouldn't think this would be the best method to go about it. So Desmond writes his name on a napkin and hands it to him and says, "This'll get you $20 on eBay." I am unclear on how to take this. I want to know whether or not this is meant to be an indicator just that he's a huge dickhead, or if we're meant to take this as he's a huge dickhead who also doesn't have as much money as he used to. I think it's just the former. At first I thought it was going to be the latter, that we were going to find out that, like, I don't know, he had spent all his money and that's the only reason he was doing this, like, gig at a college, you know? But I don't think that's what they intended. I just wanted to check and see if I was the only one who thought that. So, he goes into the bedroom of this suite. And I love the fact that he keeps calling Piz by a different name every time. He calls him Piss, I think, at one point. Fez. I don't know if he calls him Jizz, but that feels like it would have been on the list and crossed off. And he says, "Why don't you go out and see if you can grab us a few of those old mini bottles off of a cart?" As he goes into the next room. I gotta catch some Z's. And he turns around and there is a woman on his bed in her underwear. And it's a really weird moment because he comes in and doesn't seem to know at all who she is. I also would like to know how she got in here, because I feel like no hotel is going to let a random woman into the suite of a dude who has not yet checked in. This doesn't totally work, is what I'm saying. It really doesn't make sense when you stop and think about it at all. There's no way that she's here. However, setting that aside, she says something like, you remember you told me to surprise you in your room? Remember? And he says, "Wait, who are you?" And she says, "Black Cat 70. And he says, oh, that was you?" And she looks super embarrassed, gets dressed, and goes rushing out of there. And this was one of those things. He says later on to Piz, make sure that people's, like, online profile and photos actually match up. But this woman is hot. So I don't know what the joke is meant to be, that he thought that she was somebody hotter. But the photo that we see later, like, that woman was easily as hot as the woman that he was talking about. So I was just kind of confused, like, is the joke supposed to be that she's unattractive? Because she's not. She's very good looking. Like, what's the deal? And yeah, it's just a weird thing where I was like, I feel like if I were younger and watching this, I would be very, like, confused about what this was saying about her as a person being attractive, and it would, like, make me sort of self-conscious about myself, because that's the thing that happens when you're younger and there's, like, things that are just sort of said in an offhand way on a show that the writers don't really give that much thought. But I know for myself and my girlfriends that I was hanging out with when we'd watch shows like that, we would begin to sort of obsess over what that meant and what it is that they are implying is unappealing about her. Or, you know, if there'll be a comment made sometimes about somebody being overweight, and then you immediately obsessively begin to compare your body to that person's body. Am I fat too? Will people think that about me? Do they already think that about me? How much weight do I need to lose to not look like that person that they just made fun of? It's an active, like, 1-to-1 ratio for me. Maybe even like 2-to-1 ratio in terms of me overthinking it to that degree. But anyway, Ariel says, "I thought it was mostly a dickhead move." Okay, noted. I was always confused about that too, but I take it now as she's too old / isn't in her 20s. Oh, ew. Oh, that didn't occur to me, Ariel, but, okay. I guess that makes more sense, because he, like, really is flirting a lot with Veronica later, but gross, but also accurate. So I guess that's that. And at this point, he reaches into his bag and he pulls out a blue robe that was in the backpack that is supposed to contain his backup tapes. Now, I'm going to tell you guys what I thought. 100% thought Desmond ditched his tapes. Desmond does not want to be here on this job. Desmond is tired of talking about the glories of the group that used to be. Desmond wants an excuse to not go on, but maybe find a way to still get paid somehow. And so he ditched his backup tape somewhere. And it turns out that it wound up being like just a simple miscommunication. It wasn't an active act of sabotage, which I did like, actually, the fact that it turned out to simply be like, oh, somebody grabbed the wrong bag. And it was like that simple. Because it's amusing to watch Veronica going around trying to like solve the case when it really isn't anything that would have like, first of all, she was given bad information because Piz tells her it was a Neptune Grand robe. And it turns out those are white, not blue. So it's immediately apparent that he like told her the wrong thing. And then there's an actual name tag in the bag indicating that this isn't Desmond's bag, which he should have noticed himself ages ago. And of course didn't, because he doesn't do anything for himself because he's a giant child. So then we have the scene with Mac trying to decide between like an Alfredo and a veggie lasagna. And Veronica starts to mock her a little bit for the fact that she's clearly into two dudes. And I am so glad that Mac was like, hi Pot, I'm Kettle. What are you doing? Are you serious? What are you doing, though? Because the absolute nerve of this bitch trying to say anything to Mac about deciding between boys is unparalleled. Who do you think you are, Veronica Mars? Girl? Like, no. Mm-mm. So good on you, Mac. I appreciate you. You said the right thing. Good for you. And then we have this moment because Veronica has been enlisted by Piz to help with finding of the tapes. She tells him, I think we should just be friends, because she doesn't realize that he's calling for something specific. And it sort of bothers her a little bit, as she says later to Wallace, like Wallace is laughing at her because she thought that Piz would be a lot more moon-eyed. And he's not. And Wallace says, oh, right, because making out with you is supposed to be a life-changing experience that he can't get over, right? And she, like, laughs, but you can see that she's a little uncomfortable because kind of, yeah, he did kind of nail exactly what it is that's bothering her. She is acting like she doesn't want him to be moony-eyed over her, but when he isn't, she's disappointed. And I will be honest, there is something to that. It can be a really sort of like not fair, but there can be an aspect of like when you are initially getting to know somebody, if they aren't super desperate right away in a way that you're sort of used to because you are young and attractive and charming, it gets your interest because you're used to that reaction. And so you're like, well, what the fuck? Why isn't he having the same reaction? What makes him so special? And that winds up being what draws you to that person. And I kind of liked that came up here. And I also found it so funny that she's like, I think we should just be friends. And he's like, yeah, that's not why I was calling. And so she's super embarrassed. So she goes to the Neptune Grand and she's getting on the elevator and there's Logan. And Logan begins to, like, ask her, basically, when you got your head shaved, you stopped staying in your dorm and you were staying in Wallace's room with Piz. And obviously is asking whether or not she cheated on him. And it's truly, I don't want to say it's offensive because that feels too strong, but the vibe I got from this, and I could be wrong, is here's a guy who got dumped because he didn't cheat. That's not what happened. But he did what feels emotionally as the equivalent of cheating. And he's trying to find something that Veronica did that makes her as bad as he is. That's sort of the vibe that I got from this. It wasn't even to me about whether or not she cheated on him so much as I felt like he was looking for leverage or something to even the playing field, because he knows that she has the upper hand in the ending of their relationship. And I feel like he kind of feels a way about that. I don't know if I'm just being uncharitable, but that was totally the vibe that I was getting from it. And I was judging him a lot for that. I'm not going to lie. So eventually he brings this up to Mac also. And Mac is just like, dude, if you're suggesting what I think, which is that you think she cheated on you, you are such a moron. And again, Mac for the win. I just love her this episode. She's just out here saying what needs to be fucking said. That's it. So then we have the investigation scene where Veronica is looking into the information. First of all, he shows her the photo of Black Cat 80. The woman in my room was Black Cat 70. Number trouble. And Black Cat 80 is, like I said, I don't feel like she's hotter. I guess it's just that she's younger, but it was hard for me to even tell that. So I think you're probably right, Ariel, as that's what it was. So she's asking whether he has photos of the woman who was in her room or any way to get in touch with her, because everybody is, of course, assuming that the woman that he ditched, who was in his room alone with his stuff, is probably the one who stole his shit. And as it turns out, that's not true. And I kind of expected it to not be true because it was too easy. It was just something that immediately you think, oh, obviously. And I was like, yeah, this show doesn't do that usually. It's almost always a surprise. And this is when he asks, has anybody ever told you that you look like a young, feisty Barbara Eden? I had to look up who that was, but that's I Dream of Jeannie. And I see it, actually. He's not entirely wrong. I remember how desperately I wanted to look like her when I was younger, because she just has such a figure and she had that hair, I just was very oh my God, she's so pretty. So yeah, he hits on her repeatedly and it's just really gross. And he's very good at being really sleazy, even though he's asking extremely, all he asks her is how old is she? But he calls her Monica, first of all, which is a great thing that they do this episode. It's just have him call everybody the wrong name. And the way that he asks, it's just this how old are you, Monica? It's so ew. Having been on the receiving end of this kind of question with that sort of tone, brings back unpleasant memories. I wish I could go back in time into those moments and just tell these guys to fuck off. I really do. So she reads the, what do you call it? The chat transcript between the two of them. And eventually she sends a Chinese character and they get it translated, and it takes a while for them to get down to it. But eventually they tell, Piz and her that, oh yeah, that means grace. But when they do, the teacher turns around. Now, I'm not entirely sure. Is this meant to be that she's the Chinese language teacher? Is that what's going on here? Or is her name Grace? Is that what it is? I wasn't sure exactly. It felt like she turned around on cue at the sound of the word Grace. So I think that's meant to be what it is. That she signed with the character that represents her name. Is that right? But yeah, I really enjoyed the twist that it turns out that she's a professor here. Oh yeah, here it is. A boring associate professor of Chinese. Okay, yeah. Ariel says, I think yes to both. Okay, so her name is Grace and she's a Chinese teacher. One of them. So they assume, like I said, she took them. But as soon as Veronica says there was medication in there, she's like, oh my God, is he okay? And it's really clear. If she could help, she would. If she had the shit, she would have given it back. But that's not what happened here. But we know that it's not actually medication. It's drugs, yes, but not for medicated reasons. But I'm trying to jump around because, okay, yeah, here it is. So there's this moment where he's getting ready for the party and Piz is trying to figure out what happened to the tapes. And Desmond just does a bit of a joke song about how we're going to find the tapes and do the show. And Piz sort of stops and is like, what was that you just did? That was actually kind of good. It sort of reminded me of some other stuff that you've done. And he convinces Desmond to not go to the party and to work on his songs instead, because the party is going to be really lame, is what he tries to convince him of. But it's such a sad moment, honestly, because he convinces him to not go. And there's a sense of, from Desmond, that he would like to stay and work on the songs. There is a part of him that actually needs this encouragement and appreciates it and is sort of thoughtful. And he goes and sits down to wait because Piz is going to go get his guitar from his dorm or something and come back. And as he's waiting, on the news comes up, Desmond Fellows appears tomorrow to give fans of cult fave My Pretty Pony a taste of what they've been missing. And Back at Work, They Still Love You is the song that starts playing. I love this bit with them in their wigs. So why does it still feel like your interview? And something about it's only a payday and your money's all that matters now. And the guy that's next to him in the video, I don't know if this is an actor that I know, but he looks like the dude from Scream 2, I think. Or no, Scream 1, the first Scream. He looks like one of the dudes who turns out to be the murderer, spoiler alert for Scream. When we come back, a household item that could be dangerous to your pets and children. And he sort of looks uncomfortable here. And when Piz comes back, forgive me, I'm adjusting my chair. When Piz comes back, Desmond is gone. He clearly rethought his plan to try and do songs. And I found it sort of interesting because the implication here is that he watched this clip and this made him give up on trying to do something new by himself. And I'm curious about what it was supposed to be that he was feeling in that moment. Is it supposed to be that everybody sees them as a duo? And so they were it's just him, but they chose a clip of the two of them playing together. And so he feels well, clearly nobody wants me when I'm on my own. Maybe that's supposed to be what it is. Because I was watching it and I sort of thought maybe this would give him a feeling of nostalgia where oh yeah, the days where I wrote music, the days where I did my best. And he would want even more to work with Piz. But he really seems to have the opposite reaction where he's just you know what, fuck this. And the next scene we see is him talking to Dick at the party about all of the different celebrities that he's slept with. Drew Barrymore, yeah. Rose McGowan, ooh, yes. Jennifer Love Hewitt, twice. And I love Dick saying, you're my idol. Who are you? Oof. That's one of those things that I feel like if you get to be a big enough celebrity, that really starts to hurt in a way that it shouldn't. People just not knowing who you are. I mean, I had somebody the other day in the Patreon group. I was still banned, so I was going to mock them, and not to be mean, but just like to joke, be like, really? But I couldn't because I was banned. I couldn't even react. But somebody called me Natalie, and I was just like, right here in my group, you can call me by the wrong name? Really? Really? And I just imagine that, like, being out amongst people that you think are your people, and it turns out that they don't even know who you are, and you're just like, oh, wow, okay, cool. So then we have the moment where he goes skinny dipping. He gets arrested, and when we rejoin him, he's in jail arguing about the Beatles with Keith Mars. I love this so much. He's so passionate about this, and there's eventually this moment when Piz comes in and is like, I think he's messing with you because people often compare him to the Beatles, his group to the Beatles. So yeah, I think he's just like kind of fucking with you. And he's, oh, you mean those Beatles? I'm sorry. I thought you meant the other ones with the 2 E's from the Lower East Side. No, they're totally fictional. And I love Keith Mars just being so irritated with this dude that he's just wasted his time on. It's just, join the club, Keith. Apparently everybody feels this way. So they go investigate that group of, I think they're a Jewish, like, community group that wants him to stop singing at the campus, and she goes to investigate them, and the dude who's the bellhop is there, and Veronica accuses him before it turns out very clearly he wasn't the one. And they run off as they finally put 2 and 2 together and realize that this bag was just taken by the wrong person. And she and Piz, there's first a bit of them commiserating, not even commiserating, but like just getting to know each other. She's talking about being on the dance team and just the general like concept of hanging out as friends and whether or not it was going to be really awkward and impossible to just go back to that. And they put on a CD that's just labeled New Crap. And they're listening to it thinking like, oh, I guess this was just some shit that he's been working on. Who knows? And when they put it on, they realize that it's actually pretty good. It's not my jam at all, but they are both pretty impressed with it. And they come up with this little plan that they are going to lie to Desmond about the fact that they are caught in traffic, so that Desmond is forced to play some of his solo stuff. And that way he can see what the reaction of the crowd will be, because he obviously doesn't have the confidence to do this on his own. Now, I don't remember what they said happened to his partner, because I think he died, right? It's not like they just broke up or something like that. His partner is gone. And I'm curious about what happened to him. I don't remember if we were told that or not, but he does indeed just go on stage and do his best. And everybody seems pretty into it. It's sort of awful for a minute, though, because when he says, how about some new solo stuff, people like actually begin to boo him. And he has to just go ahead and do it anyway. And that's really some balls, you know? It's one thing to like go out into a room full of people that you know adore you and are here for what you're about to do. But to try and like get them when they are fully expecting something in particular to listen to a whole other thing, that is really takes guts. And, you know, he's lucky that he got a good response, but that's not guaranteed. And I just appreciate a lot when artists try and like sort of widen their horizons try out some new things. It's just a really tricky thing to do when you've become established and known for one thing in particular. And I was actually talking about this with Rashawn because I don't remember, I think it was on Dresden Files, but we were talking about Garth Brooks and how he had the alter ego. And I was like, at first just finding it so hilarious because the alter ego was the corniest looking dude. Like, I get what he was trying to do, but I was just really, it was so silly looking. At the same time, though, I can only imagine what it must be like if you are only known for country music and you are interested in doing something a little bit different. And I don't even think his alter ego didn't do country, although maybe he did rock or something. But it was like, you know, just different enough that probably his people were like, you can't do that. No, you've got a market built in. You go for that market and make your money and make me my money, bitch. And that's got to be a really difficult thing to do. I am somebody who always wants to please people. And it would be really, you know, I think about that sometimes with Unspoiled. I am in the position where I really love what I do. And I'm probably never going to run out of material. There's always going to be stuff to cover. There's always new shit coming out that everybody wants to share with somebody, find out what other people thought about. It's likely that I will be able to do this as is forever. That said, what if something else were to make itself known as an option for me that I would be very passionate about? I can't think of anything, but what if? And I suddenly had to like get people on board with a project that was totally different. I can say with complete honesty, that's very nerve-wracking. That's something that's like, I mean, I kind of tried to do that a little bit when I did the broadcast and it didn't work out. But the broadcast was also incredibly draining in terms of energy. It was a bummer, to be perfectly honest. It was a bummer. And so I don't take it as personally that didn't work out, because I understand why people are not interested in listening to that, because it was hard for me to record it. But if it were something that I loved doing and it felt like people just weren't receptive to it, that would be pretty heartbreaking. So this is the sort of thing that I feel like can come across as a really trite story. Oh, the super famous musician has to learn to go it on his own and it's so hard. But like, honestly, creatively, it is so hard. It's something that I think probably a lot of people who wind up with a modicum of success begin to struggle with, because the success comes with people knowing your brand. And that's a blessing and a curse, you know? Anyway, I just thought that was sort of, I said it before too. I think that Paul Rudd plays this role really well here, where he comes across as like, what is it that Veronica calls him? A wastoid lech, I think. And I feel like he does a good job of being the wastoid lech, but also there's an undercurrent of deep sadness to it. Like, he knows better, or like there's just self-loathing in it, you know? So as much as you find him gross and you kind of want to be like, fuck off, dude, you're also like, what is going on, man? This is really sad, and I think you know that. Why are you know? And that's a very difficult line to walk, because I have seen that kind of attempt before at a story of like, oh yeah, he's a dickhead, but he's a real tortured soul. And I'm like, who cares? Stop being an asshole. And I don't have any sympathy. And he manages to make me feel a drop of sympathy, but it doesn't feel like the show's trying to excuse what he's doing either. They're also being like, oh, but yeah, no, he's definitely being an asshole. Don't get me wrong. He needs to like unlearn some of that garbage. Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about what the hell is going on with Keith Mars. Well, actually, no, first, let's talk about Logan and Mac, Mac breaks up with her adorable environmentalist boyfriend. I mean, he hasn't been on the show. Like, in terms of the casting, it makes sense. They feel like they need to keep one dude. And also, I sort of like that Mac gets the opportunity to be with somebody else instead of it feeling like, oh, she had the one boyfriend who was like a serial killer and also traumatized her, immediately fell into the arms of this other cute boy, and that was just it for her forever. I sort of enjoy that they're giving Mac some options. And I don't know if he's going to be out of the picture entirely, but because she breaks up with him in a decisive way, it feels like that's it, and we're not going to see him again. I, personally, am heartbroken, because, as you all know, I just think he is the most adorable thing I've ever seen. But you do feel a lot more chemistry between her and the other kid, whose name I'm forgetting. So in terms of like watching people on screen together, they get along better and are more interesting and fun to watch. And, but that comes later. First we have the thing with Logan. Logan is in class, and apparently everybody is supposed to be presenting a business idea. And Logan, unsurprisingly, isn't prepared and wants some extra time. His teacher is fed up and does one of those like, oh, I'm so surprised kind of responses to this. And it's the kind of thing that on the one hand, I really understand how you would feel this way about Logan. He's a spoiled brat, full stop, and doesn't try because he doesn't have to. His livelihood isn't going to come down to how he does in this class. It doesn't matter. So there has to be resentment there. On the other hand, that whole like, oh, big surprise kind of attitude is really a lot more damaging sometimes than I think people realize, because you're basically saying, I expected no better because you're always a disappointment and you'll always be a disappointment. And, you know, this guy's just some random professor. I don't expect him to be Logan's fucking like life coach or anything. But even a sort of offhand comment like that can be sort of hurtful long term in a way that makes you go, oh, I've always felt like I was a piece of shit. And obviously everybody else does too. Cool. You know, I had this a little bit when I first moved down here. I was going to be taking 2 of my cats with me. They were going to be sent from Philly. And then we found Ripley. She was a stray outside, and she was, you know, undergrown. She's still rather like small for a cat, and she had no tail, and one of her ears was all chewed, and she just needed a home. And we took her in, but doing that meant that I couldn't bring my 2 cats down because 4 was going to be too many for this house. And I got in touch with Brendan and told him, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to take her. And Brendan said, oh, it's fine. I expected you to weasel out of it anyway, or something to that effect. And it was just one of those like really unnecessary comments. He isn't a mean-spirited person, but it would leak out every now and then. And I remember at the time just being like, oh, cool, wow, because that felt like a summary of our whole relationship. He always sort of thought the worst and expected the worst of me. And it's just tough to realize that somebody sees you that way. So Logan decides that he's going to kind of go for it, actually, and come up with what he calls like a lowest common denominator business model. A site called Rate My Ass. Now, I am certain, without a doubt, this site exists. I have no doubt at all that something almost exactly like this is out there. And I think there was a site that was just called Hot or Not, and that was like that was on faces. I don't even think it was a full body. I think it was just faces. But this is like meant to be just asses, and apparently just women's asses, which I'm not even going to get into how irritating that is. But he actually puts a fair amount of work into getting this set up, and Mac helps him. And so the two of them get a little bit friendlier. This is when he asks about whether or not, Veronica and Piz were already hooking up. She puts in a stake on the site because it becomes an actual functioning website. I don't even remember how the money aspect works, but he will be making some. And she's going to get 50% for helping him to set it up. And then he goes in front of the class and begins to do his presentation. And his teacher stops him because he finds it, frankly, offensive. And the thing is, it is. This is, I think, we maybe are meant to think that his teacher is just not really open-minded enough to see that, yeah, it's stupid, but it's also a business. But I have to feel it's a millionaire playboy student who doesn't put forth much effort most of the time, showing up and doing what feels like a joke project. And it's honestly surprising to me that apparently Logan didn't see it coming, that it would be interpreted that way. He really went into this seriously and was intending to do this whole presentation. And when he gets stopped, it's sort of for a moment, he doesn't get what's happening. And I was like, dude, you have made it so clear how little you care about this class from the start. That's been a running thing, is that you aren't interested, don't prioritize it, and don't really even seem to care if you graduate or not. And low-key, he doesn't have anybody pushing him anymore. He doesn't have parents in his life. He doesn't have anybody that's what are you doing, guy? Other than maybe Parker. We saw her in one episode being are you going to go to fucking class or what? But other than that, he doesn't have anyone that's sort of watching, monitoring, that he can be accountable to. Despite that, one would hope that he would give a shit enough on his own. But if you have all the money you're ever going to need, it's kind of hard to feel the urgency that a student like me, for example, would feel, where I know whatever I do is going to be tied to my livelihood for the rest of my life. Or it would have been had I decided to pursue a career in what I went to college for, which I did not. So I really I feel like I'm supposed to be mad at his teacher in this scene. I'm not it at all. It really feels more like, Logan, buddy, why did you pick this project and handle it this way? Come on, you should have realized how this was going to look. And I just think that what we're going to see probably in upcoming episodes is this site's already set up and it's already meant to be making money. I am guessing we are going to see him beginning to grow successful due to this business idea. I mean, and I say successful like he isn't already, but he isn't due to his own merits. And maybe this will turn into something that he actually gets invested in. But if so, if this were real life, I would say this is when he quits college. This is when he just decides to go out and do a bunch of really stupid lowest common denominator websites as a living. And that's what he winds up making his name in, and he never finishes school, because why would you? honestly. So I guess we'll see what happens with that. And then there is the last thing. So remember Leo? Season 1? Is he in season 1 or was it season 2? I feel like maybe it was 2. But Leo got fired because he basically fucked around and Veronica got into some shit she shouldn't have because he was distracted. And he got fired because of it. And she felt guilty, but also he was too old for her and it was super creepy. And I stand by that and I'm still kind of annoyed about it, to be honest. Well, he's back now and he's apparently working in security. And he comes to Keith because there is a new guy who got hired on the security detail who is apparently working with the Fitzpatricks. And that's not enough on its own, but he sort of kept an eye on the guy. And he's been noticing this dude taking photos of the area and doing things that makes it seem like he's casing the joint, as Keith puts it. And he brought it up to his superior, and the superior said that they would look into it, and the next day he had been reassigned to a different building. And it just feels incredibly significant to him that some shit's about to go down. And Keith agrees with him. So what they do is they go and watch the building. I don't even remember exactly how he figures out what night shit's going to go down on. But let's see. That truck isn't supposed to be here. They're getting an early start. And they spot, what's his face? I think I always want to call him Tony, and it's a different Italian name. Help me out, guys. But yeah, we see one of the Fitzpatricks, and he's like carrying out, I'm not even sure what this place is meant to be that they are stealing stuff from. Vinny. Oh, that's it. Vinny. And he's got like this mustache on, and I was just like, really? So Keith calls the cops and tells them, Sachs, there's a burglary in progress. Please come and bring a bunch of cars with you. And he's about to get out of the car and do some shit. He pulls out his camera, Keith does, because he's going to try and get the money shot here. He is training his camera on Vinny, and Vinny closes the doors of this building, puts a padlock on them and locks them shut, then pulls his phone out and calls the cops himself. And as it turns out, he set this up so that he could look like a hero. Because as it turns out, he's going to be running for sheriff against Keith. I had said last episode that I sort of expected the dudes who fired Keith to be a problem for him. Or the dudes that Keith fired, sorry, not that fired Keith. I stand by that. I think that they are going to resurface and maybe be throwing their weight behind Vinny. But as of right now, I like the idea of Vinny running for sheriff is so hilarious to me. I am very excited to see how this goes because Keith has experience. He was a PI, but he isn't as publicly sketchy as Vinny is. I feel like Vinny has fewer scruples than Keith and is more open about the fact that he has fewer scruples. So I just have to imagine that there's a lot of dirt that could be dug up on him. That said, I bet there's dirt that could be dug up on Keith too. It's just that I've always been so much on Keith's side that I see it from a particular perspective when maybe other people wouldn't see it that way. I mean, he's like impersonated officers and broken into places and God knows what else. It really just depends on what can be proven. Well, I say that. That's not true. Probably Vinny could just put an idea out there and that begins to sort of take root, and what's true doesn't wind up being as important. But to me, the biggest problem that I have with this idea is that I don't see Vinny being somebody who wants to be in charge. It's one thing to own your own business in this way, when you have the freedom to move around. He's specifically in a business where being sketchy, doing things that are illegal, is part of the job and kind of like favorable to your job description. But he is like trying to get himself put into a position where he will have a lot less like daily, what's the word I want? Not encounter, but like he won't be able to get his hands dirty every day. A sheriff is not as involved in day-to-day operations because he's sort of somebody who provides oversight and leadership. And that doesn't feel like Vinny to me at all. And Let's see. Ariel says, this show started with everyone in town hating him for accusing the beloved Kane dad of his daughter's murder. With hating Keith? Is that what you said, Ariel? Sorry, it's been so long since I watched the first season that I don't even remember how that happened. So you're saying that it would be easy enough to turn things around on Keith because they've done it in the past. Which I guess I could see. It's just more for me about Vinny's personality. He, as a person, doesn't sound like somebody who would want this. He, as a person, doesn't seem like going for a job like this would be a goal for him at all. He's like Varys in Game of Thrones. Varys is wily and very mobile because he can take on disguises. He gets a lot of information, but he isn't the man in charge, and he doesn't want to be the man in charge. Part of the flexibility he enjoys is allowed to him because he's not on the top of everybody's list to watch. So that's sort of how I view Vinny, is like, you're able to get away with all the shit you do because all eyes are not on you. I feel like putting yourself in the midst of it all as the guy is drawing the kind of attention that is exactly contrary to everything that Vinny is always trying to accomplish. And I don't know, I'm interested to see if like there's more to him trying to become sheriff than meets the eye. Is there something else to it? Does he want it for other reasons? Is it just because he needs fucking dental? Which honestly, that would be very relatable. Or has he decided like being a PI is no longer the life for me? I'm getting too old for this shit, so to speak. I just find it surprising. That's all I'm saying. Oh, and also, Keith talks to Leo about the whole thing and eventually rehires him as deputy. So Leo is going to be part of things again, which I don't really know how I feel about it because, like, you guys know, I am super anti-Leo and Veronica together. And I can't help but feel like they're pulling him back into this story to have there be another potential, like, love interest or somebody that she at least has some sort of chemistry with. And I found it really uncomfortable that they were having this, like, grown man date a teenager in high school before. It's only slightly better now that she's not in high school anymore, but he's still the same person who was willing to date a high schooler, and that makes him a creep to me. So I can't get past that. And I'm just hoping that they don't do a whole thing with that, because frankly, her and Piz getting together at the end of this and holding hands, that's about where I'm ready to leave her whole relationship thing. I personally am not, I don't feel like bringing Leo back is a great call or a particularly interesting call. It's just sort of an odd move. And I'd be interested to know, like, behind the scenes why they thought this was the way to go. But it is what it is. Ariel says, Leo was fired for his own misdeeds. He stole evidence of the Lillian Logan's dad's sex tape to sell for his sister's cancer fund. Thank you, Ariel. I couldn't remember what it was that happened. I thought that he, like, allowed Veronica to get into something and steal, like, evidence, and he got in trouble for that, but it was actively him, like, selling shit, which makes a lot more sense. Thank you. I totally forgot about that. And she follows up with, so Leo is a bad look for Keith, too. That's true. Like, hiring him as a deputy after what he did, that's a lot of fodder that Vinny is going to be able to use, because Vinny is absolutely going to know all about what happened with that tape. So, yikes. And Vinny comes in gloating because Keith said something nice to him in the newspaper about how he's an asset to our community. And he's like, oh, that's going to look amazing on all my posters when I run against you. And that's pretty much the end of the episode. So that was satisfying. I actually rather liked it ending on us finding out who's going to run against Keith. Because of course he can't run unopposed. Like, who cares about that? Have to put somebody in there. So I guess we'll see what's going to happen. But thank you again so much to all of you for listening. Thank you, Agnes, for commissioning this episode. And thank you, Ariel, for hanging out in the chat and giving me all the info that I had forgotten about. And I will see you guys again. Let's see, when's the next one? On April 23rd, about a month out for the next episode. So stay tuned. And until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.